is how I used to create my vision board, and this is how I create it now. And the only thing that changed are the 7 secrets I'm about to share with you in this video. You see, vision board is both an art and a science, but from experience, I've noticed that people get hung on the art and then neglect the science behind it. The problem is, whenever people want to create a vision board, they automatically go around scouting for pictures to paste on the board. But then this approach is wrong, and there's a much better way of doing it. In this video, I will not only give you 7 critical steps that will skyrocket how much you're able to achieve, but also a unique approach on how to go about planning the roadmap to achieve those goals. Now let's move on. Step 1, radical honesty. Honesty is the name of the game over here. You have to be honest with yourself, regardless of how embarrassing or uncomfortable it might be. You have to be honest and truthful with your answers. No wishful thinking, no lying, no embellishment. It's either a yes or a no, regardless of how embarrassing it might be. Do not lie. Number 2, mental visualization. Now let's get to the root of what we're doing today. It's called a vision board for a reason, because it has to be a vision first in your head. You have to visualize it in your head before it starts to manifest, right? So it's likely that nothing in your environment resembles what you're gunning for. So you have to visualize it in your head first before you can manifest it in the physical. Unfortunately, I have to point something out at this point. Due to Pinterest, Instagram, Canva, and the rest of them, people sometimes forget how to visualize things. You know, we always tend to run to those platforms first, and that's why I advise that you don't do that. Actually sit with yourself and visualize yourself in that dream. Visualize yourself in that environment. Do you want to buy a car? Can you visualize yourself actually riding that car, living in that house, making that amount of money? Let it be a vision first. Don't run to Pinterest yet. I have to emphasize how important this step is, and in fact, I'm going to give you cues on how to go about it. Now, I need you to close your eyes and think of your dream life. Just visualize it. What's your life like? Where do you live? What car do you drive? Is it a G-Wagon? Can you visualize yourself driving that G-Wagon? What career do you have? How much do you earn? Can you visualize yourself just actually being there and earning that amount of money? That's how you do that. The rule is very simple. If you cannot visualize it, don't go about looking for pictures. You have to visualize it yourself. Now, the next 3 steps work very closely together, and I'm going to give you a brief rundown before we start going step by step again. Step 3 is externalization. Step 4 is inside to outside mapping. And step 5 is best case scenario versus worst case scenario. Step 3, which is externalization, simply means the things you've envisioned in your head, it's time to put it down on paper, a journal, whatever. Just write it down and make sure there's no distraction in your environment, so it's easier for you to recall the things you've been thinking about, right? How does this work, you ask? Let me explain. Now listen carefully. Like I said earlier, step 4 and 5 work hand in hand together. That is the inside to outside mapping, the best case scenario versus worst case scenario. And now I'm going to explain what this actually means. When we talk about inside to outside mapping, it's very simple. It simply means we're going to work from the inside to the outside. And the best case scenario versus the worst case scenario simply means that for everything you've written down so far, there's going to be a best case scenario and a worst case scenario for that. But mind you, worst case scenario doesn't connote a negative thing. It simply means at the end of the day, it's still progress, but a realistic progress. So simply put, worst case scenario is still progress, not fantasy. Additionally, I'm going to give you an optional step. Like I said, it's optional, but I'll still recommend you do it. And that is, for everything you've written down so far, can you put down the reason why you want those things? Now, I understand that for some things, there's simply no reason to it. And like I said, it's okay not to write it down. But if you can would say, can you put down the reason why you want to achieve each goal? You want to buy a car, can you put down the reason why you want to have a new car? You want to move to a new apartment, can you put down the reason why you actually need to move to the new apartment? Because sometimes it's good to just have a reason for something, right? Finally, it's time to implement them. How do we actually work from inside to outside? Like I said earlier, it's very simple. It simply means we are going to work with what we are currently inside of to what we are outside of. Oh, does that make sense? Let me try this again. It simply means we're going to work from the inside to outside. So inside means what I'm currently seeing. For instance, I'm currently in my room, and if I look around, I can see my desk, I can see my computer, I can see my bed, I can see the floor, I can see the wardrobe. So I will ask myself, is there any of these things that I need to change? So like all the things I'm seeing right now, do I need to change anything? And the answer to that is yes. Now, since my answer is yes, there are things I want to change in this room. I am going to map it out. Like I have a best case scenario and I have a worst case scenario. The best case scenario is I would love to move to a new apartment this year. I would love to move to a bigger apartment. I would love to perhaps even buy a house if that's possible. Since my answer is yes to this question, I actually want to change some things about my room or about my house that I can see currently, which is now I am going to map it out. What's the best case scenario and what's the worst case scenario? In the best case scenario for this apartment, I would love to move to a much bigger apartment. I would love to buy a house. That's the best case scenario. And in the worst case scenario is, if for some reason I'm unable to do this, I would love to perhaps repaint the house, maybe change the floor, maybe do something like, find a way to upgrade the room so it's nicer. Does that make sense why I say that a worst case scenario is not a negative thing and it's not fantasy? At the end of the day, it's still something realistic. It's like, oh, just being realistic. If for some reason I'm unable to do the things that I've been, that I'm planning to do right now, like, moving to a bigger apartment or buying a house. If I'm unable to do that, what can I realistically do? That I know that I can actually do this. I know I can afford. I know I can afford to repaint the room. I know I can afford to change the floor. I know I can afford to do some things. So yes, worst case scenario is still a very realistic plan at the end of the day. So now that you actually understand what I'm talking about, feel free to move around your house and actually look through things. Go to the kitchen, go to the living room, go to the bathroom, go to the toilet and all that. Have a look and ask yourself, is there anything here that I would like to change? Do you want to buy a new microwave? Do you want to buy a new stove? Do you want to... It doesn't matter, whatever it is that you need to change in your house, you are going to write it down and then have a best case scenario for that and a worst case scenario for that. For a microwave, perhaps the best case scenario is buying a new one and the worst case scenario is going on Facebook Marketplace to perhaps buy a cheap one or a used one. So like I said, at the end of the day, the worst case scenario is always progress. Now that you perfectly understand what I mean by inside, let's now go to the next domain, which is outside. And that simply means the things that you cannot see currently. If you look around you, I'm sure you can't see a degree. You can't see a university, you can't see a job around you. Those are things that you can't see. So now it's time for you to start writing them down. What's your plan for the coming year? Do you want to get a degree? Do you want to go back to school? Do you want to apply for a new job? Do you want to get a certification? It's time to write those things down right now. Put it down, and what is the best case scenario for you and what's the worst case scenario for that? At this point, I have to pause and say that if you're like me who likes to write down things in a structured manner, I actually have a free template included in the description box for those who are interested. Like I was saying, don't forget that for every single goal that you write down, there is a best case scenario and there's a worst case scenario. And optionally, you have to include the reason why you want to achieve that goal. Unfortunately, those that fail tend to stop here, but that's not true because you're not just stuck with the written plan. You actually move on to the next step of executing it. Step 6 is sorting and filtering. Now, we need to sort and filter because I'm sure like every other person, you have both the small plans and the lofty plans. You have plans that will take a few days to some that will take a few years. Yes, and this is why it's important that at this point, I would say, take off your emotional cap and put on the logical cap. You see, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario that we described earlier on, this is where it shines. I say take away the emotional cap and put on the logical cap because it's important that you're very realistic at this point. With the resources and time that you have, what goals can you realistically work towards achieving? Knowing this will spare you a lot of disappointment, shame, and embarrassment. In fact, I have a policy of never, ever, ever disappointing myself. I don't care about disappointing others, but I just never disappoint myself. Because you know one thing, the moment you start disappointing yourself, you get used to doing that. And that's how you lose your self-confidence. That's how you lose the trust in yourself. And that's how even when you set other goals, you can't trust yourself to do it because you are used to disappointing yourself. Does that make sense? What goals can you realistically pursue with the resources at your disposal? Say for instance, I want to buy a house. I want to save $1 million. I want to buy 2 cars. But that's virtually impossible based on the resources at my disposal at the moment. And so I might need to defer to my worst case scenario, which is, all right, what's come to worst? What can I do? Perhaps I will say, oh, I will save $10,000. Oh, I will buy a single car. Perhaps I'll keep renting an apartment. I can't afford a house right now. So you have to be very realistic with the goal that you're setting because like I mentioned earlier, you want to be honest with yourself. So this way I'm not setting myself off for embarrassment or frustration at the end of the year. And remember that at the beginning I said that honesty is the name of the game. You have to be truthful with yourself. There's no need to embellish something. If you know that you cannot afford a house right now, why do you have a house on the board? If you know you can't afford a car right now, why do you have 10 cars on the board? It doesn't make any sense. Try to be realistic with the plans that you make. And now we've gotten to step 7, which is be smart. Trust me, once you complete the stage, you've passed the major hurdles. It gets easier from here. Now for this step, Only goals that pass the SMART test should make it to your vision board. And SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Now let's explain further. So we're saying that for any goal to make it to your vision board, it must be specific, it must be measurable, it must be attainable or achievable, it must be realistic, and it must be time-bound. I'll give you an instance. Say for instance, I decide to save $100,000 this year. It's very specific, it's measurable, but it's not attainable because I don't even have a job that makes up to 100K at the moment. So why you want to do that, it's not realistic for you. And let's even say, for instance, you actually make 100K a year. I'm sure you have bills to pay. So saving 100K a year might not be smart for some people. Therefore, it shouldn't make it to your vision board. And let me tell you this, you are actually better off achieving 10 out of 12 goals on your board than achieving only 2 out of, say, 50 goals on the board, because the goals are not smart. In fact, you already failed before you started. Congratulations if you made it to this stage, because usually this is where most people jump to and neglect the other previous steps we just went through now. It's finally time to create the vision board, and I'll show you guys how to